In 1858 was launched the largest ship the world had seen. She was a paddle steamer, the Great Eastern, of nearly 23,000 tons. This ship was such an outstanding achievement that she inspired Jules Verne, the H.G. Wells of the last century, to write his famous novel, Floating City. If he were alive today, what flights of fancy would flow through his magic pen at sight of these modern craft? For his floating city was a village compared with the ocean skyscrapers that daily come and go from this great dock and seaport, Southampton. The merchantmen of the empire and the world sail in, sail out. Southampton, the world's largest and most important passenger port, may well be called the Clapham Junction of the East. Here's our floating city, the Queen Mary, pride of the British mercantile fleet. She reflects all the tradition and character of a great sea-loving nation whose very existence depends on her maritime supremacy. "100 years ago, this 700-ton wooden-hulled paddle steamer, the Britannia, left England for New York. She was the first Cunard steamship to cross the North Atlantic. Her cargo, 1 cow. The little Britannia would go inside the dining room of the Queen Mary, and her passengers in one of the latest Cunard lifeboats. From the Britannia to the Queen Mary, what a transition, what a story of progress. But our purpose is to show you life aboard a modern liner, not to trace its evolution. The last passengers aboard, the last batch of cargo safely under hatches. The gangway swung ashore, and the small but powerful tugs slowly towed their gigantic sister towards the open sea. The responsibility of seeing a great liner safely out of port doesn't lie with its captain. This is a job for the harbour pilot, a man whose whole life has been spent in acquiring an intimate knowledge of local conditions. And so we swiftly crossed the English Channel to our first and only port of call, Cherbourg, France's, and for that matter, the continent's premier Atlantic seaport. Cherbourg is entirely different to Southampton. It's essentially a harbour and not a dock, thus not possessing the extensive buildings, machinery, and ramifications that accompany the shipyards, dry docks, and other facilities offered by Southampton. Cherbourg, however, is a strongly fortified naval port, and as such has been a target, first of all, for the bombs of Nazi Germany, and subsequent for the bombers of our Royal Air Force. But no matter how great the material damage to the quays, breakwaters, and equipment, no power on earth can destroy this natural harbour. Passengers from all parts of Europe and Western Asia travel by rail, road, or air to Cherbourg to connect with the liner sailing to the New World. Their luggage is slung aboard in cradles and lowered into the hold, where waiting sailors quickly pack it away. No time is wasted. Everything has to be kept to schedule. A liner works on a timetable just as precise as a railway service. The promenade deck is almost 100 feet above the waterline. The crow's nest towers another 110 feet above that and is built round the top of this tubular steel mast, 4 feet in diameter and rising from the bowels of the ship. It's reached by climbing hand over fist up a ladder of more than 100 rungs constructed inside the mast. In the crow's nest, the lookout has an uninterrupted view over a great expanse of ocean, and from there our cameraman secured the most unique shot ever taken of any great liner. It's a bird's eye view from immediately overhead, and the effect is curious. The deck of the Queen Mary looks like a gun emplacement. Right to time, everything is set for our departure, and soon we're gliding out of port. No pilot to guide us on this occasion. From now on, our 81,000-ton floating city, with its 3,200 inhabitants, is in the sole charge of the captain, who on this trip is the commodore of the line. Here he is on the bridge, going to the port side projecting wing to see his ship safely out of Cherbourg Harbour. For the next 5 days, he's a man among men, a viceroy ruling a floating part of the British Empire. We steam slowly past the Martello-like port, and so out to the North Atlantic. Early next morning, few people have as yet found their sea legs. This is the nerve center of the ship's organization, the main purser's office. From here, the comforts and interests of the passengers are supervised. It's the clearinghouse for all the services that one expects on a modern luxury liner. The chief purser acts as ship's host, entertaining the famous from all spheres of life. His cabin becomes a social club where the celebrities meet. On the assistant pursers falls the job of organizing ship's concerts, sports meetings, tournaments, and the more exacting job of satisfying passengers' demands. The pursers in charge of the safe deposit also have the responsibility of compiling the ship's manifest, which is a complete record of every passenger and member of the crew, all of whom, on coming aboard, have to fill up a form of personal particulars. The ship's bank is a branch office of one of the big five. Its facilities, including an international currency exchange bureau, are available to all passengers. This is the main lounge on the promenade deck, 96 feet long, 70 feet in breadth, and superior to anything the most luxurious London hotels can offer. On the left, the proscenium arch of the fully equipped stage, which has its own talkie apparatus. The floor is laid in parquet for dancing. Mirrors are placed so as to give still greater depth and add to the cheerfulness of this lovely room. Mural decorations are by the world's foremost artists. Few passengers are about as yet, and the shopping center has only just opened. This is the Burlington Arcade of the ship, with a full range of fancy goods, clothing, ornaments, and gifts. Many famous West End names can be seen. Most of these shops do an extensive business in souvenirs and novelties. Every section of every deck has one or more lifts connecting with the other decks. Otherwise, if you were going from a cabin on C deck to the gymnasium on the sun deck, you'd be faced with 6 of these staircases, after which you wouldn't need the gym. In place of honor on the grand staircase, the plaque commemorating the ship's launching. It was the first time in history that a ship was graced with the name of a living queen. After checking up on the space given to sports facilities on board, we rather expected to bump into a 9-hole golf course in some odd corner. However, we did discover 2 full-sized, ultra-modern swimming pools. This is the cabin-class pool with a tank 40 feet by 60 feet. Well, we're having a spot of rough weather just now. You can see that by the water in the tank. At such times, the attendants have to watch that we don't dive into the 6-foot end and find only 2 feet of water. They assured us that being a good diver doesn't make the towels any softer. From swimming to an even more strenuous sport, squash. This is a regulation-sized court, and it's in constant use. That's our friend, the ship's bank manager, keeping down his overdraft. After a splashing good time in the swimming pool, during which you develop a healthy appetite, you return to your cabin to prepare for dinner. If it's too warm or too cold, you simply adjust the compact ventilators with immediate effect. As for service, it's in keeping with the surroundings. The last word, and as near as your end of the phone. On the other end, the switchboard, which is a miniature telephone exchange in itself. Here, speed and accuracy are essential, not only for the passenger's comfort, but for the safety of the vessel at sea. Of course, it was the beauty parlor she was phoning. We hope the boyfriend notices the new coiffeur, but we know darn well he won't. He'll just grouse about being kept waiting. Men are like that. And here he is, arranging for a quick visit to the ship's barber shop. They offer a complete West End service. All the losers, political situation, next year's Derby winner, very old magazines. Shaves, shampoos, and haircuts if desired. The largest room ever built in a ship, the restaurant on C deck. It It's 160 feet long and the entire breadth of the ship. The dome is pierced through to A deck, 30 feet above. Over 800 diners can be seated in this enormous chamber, their chairs and tables hardly reaching the line of the dado at the base of the massive column. Many decks below lie the kitchens. They're so extensive, the chef has to give his instructions to the various departments by loudspeaker. Every Atlantic liner vies with its competitor to provide the best cuisine to satisfy the most fastidious tastes. Catering for 4 meals a day for 5 days for over 3,000 people is no light task. Here's Marty, the man on whose shoulders that responsibility falls. He's issuing orders for the day's menu, one each for the 3 classes, another for the crew, and many others for those on special diets. In addition, there's an a la carte from which it's possible to order almost any dish. After dinner, there's dancing in the main lounge, and they tell me many a ship's romance has turned to real romance while gliding to the strains of a waltz. The supreme thrill, rarely experienced by any passenger, is to be allowed on the bridge of a great liner during a transatlantic crossing. It's the control room of our floating city. From here, the captain issues his instructions to all parts of the ship. It's impossible to overemphasize the extent of his responsibility, first and foremost to the passengers and crew, and secondly to the British mercantile service. Any mishap to his ship would be a blot on their exceptional record. Remember her colossal proportions. 10 million rivets went into the making of the vessel, and sufficient steel plating to pave the 100-mile highway from London to Leicester. Any one of her funnels would hold 3 Royal Scot locomotives traveling abreast. Instructions are sent to the engine room via this telegraph. This is the main engine room, where turbo generators are producing the 200,000 horsepower required to propel the ship's 82,000 tons through the seas at more than 30 knots. Back on the bridge, in addition to the steering wheel, there's an automatic equipment which enables the captain to set his ship on its course in advance. This is the gear that actually controls the rudder. Also on the bridge is this panel, showing all the safety doors and whether they're open or closed. In an emergency, any of these doors can be shut by remote control from the bridge. It's possible to divide the ship into a number of self-contained, watertight compartments. Thus, experts claim, the Queen Mary could be cut in 2 and continue to float. The main engine room is the center of a tremendous hive of machinery. 4 great turbines, each with 257,000 blades, all fitted by hand. 27 boilers with 160,000 tubes. 220 oil fuel burners. These control panels show the most minute flickering of power in the smallest unit of the enormously complicated mechanism. A sign that always means electricity. And in this case, the greatest floating powerhouse ever built by man. Imagine the current required to supply the whole ship with power and light. Actually, the Queen Mary consumes more electricity than a town of 20,000 inhabitants. Another striking feature is the length of cables used for light, power, and communications. 4,000 miles of it. The maintenance in perfect condition of all this mechanism is a Herculean task performed by more than 50 engineers. Every section of this machinery, every plate, every screw has its own blueprint and was planned on paper to the last detail before construction began. What a nightmare. You'd have thought it impossible to build such engines inside a ship. It's interesting to note that each machine, no matter what its size or capacity, was first assembled in workshops, tested, then pulled to pieces and reassembled inside the hull of the liner. Looking up this ventilation chart gives the impression of being down a mine. The chief engineer is the captain below deck. His responsibility is in many ways equal to, and on occasion greater than that of the Commodore. Like most chiefs, he's a northerner coming from Yorkshire, and his right-hand man comes from Scotland, home of the world's greatest shipping engineer. You may well ask, at sight of all this stationary equipment, just what does move? Well, the answer's simple. The technical description of the Queen Mary's propulsion is a quadruple screw, single reduction, geared turbine steamer. In plain English, she has 4 propellers. And everything that you've seen in the engine room contributes ultimately to the one purpose of keeping them turning. This ventilator is one of many through which air is sucked in, purified by these machines, and then distributed throughout the ship. Good ventilation is essential on board a liner where every inch of space is made use of. Its importance is emphasized by the fact that a large part of any ship's services are situated below the waterline. On the sports deck, our canine passengers are cared for. Not that it matters, mind you, but the ship's butcher is in charge of our collection of pets. Oh, God. Looking ahead to the time of arrival, the Travel Bureau supplies passengers with all desired information concerning the country they're to visit. The wireless room. Thanks to Marconi, the perils of the sea have been reduced to a minimum. Nowadays, a liner keeps in constant touch with the outer world. One particular service is picking up the BBC News and relaying it to the public room. The laboratory, with a qualified chemist in charge, supplies an essential service. He collaborates with the ship's medical officer and is also responsible for daily testing the water supply. Every modern luxury liner has its printing press, and most publish their own newspapers. Here we have a complete printing works, with linotype and many other machines capable of producing a full range of printed matter. Ship's programs, menus, competition lists, etc. And the 8-page daily Ocean Times. The end of our journey, New York Harbor. The skyscrapers tower in front of us, piercing the early morning mist. The usual large crowd awaits our arrival at the quay, and soon we begin to appreciate what is meant by American hospitality. For 5 days we've lived aboard our floating city, enjoying the fascination and delight of a sea voyage, and yet retaining every comfort and pleasure of metropolitan life. The stake is freedom, the difference between a world of whimpering, soulless, goose-stepping robots, cringing in the shadow of a twisted cross and a twisted mind, and a family of nations who forget size and power, history and politics, language and creed, and from today make it a victory for good, as they build, slowly perhaps but surely, on the pattern of one who preached and lived the one word, service. So today, our floating city has become a cog in the machine that drives toward that goal, symbol of an empire that works as one man, an empire that is not separated but bound by the 7 seas, symbol of the power of good that will bring back happiness to a waiting world.